Welcome everyone to our presentation, Better Healthcare Connections for Our Veterans. We are here because our state is taking advantage of 9010 federal funds made possible by the Affordable Care Act. We are specifically going to present our findings as to how best your organization should allocate these funds. We will do this by taking a closer look at the opportunity. What is at stake for your organization in relation with the goals that you want to achieve? Looking at the influencing factors that motivate our recommendation, taking a look at the greater context of the two proposals that you have before you, the Department of Corrections versus the Department of Veteran Affairs, and then finally taking a deep dive into our recommendation. Specifically, what's at stake? Your organization has $100,000 to pursue a new project that not only will modernize the Medicaid system, but would improve access for targeted populations. Your decision lies in choosing which one of two agency proposals will better meet your overarching goals. The Department of Corrections or the Department of Veteran Services. Both agencies have compelling reasons as to why they should receive this funding, yet the Department of Veteran Services is the one that better meets the overarching goals that you have for this project, which are to streamline the process, to maximize efficiency, to improve interagency communication, to improve customer service, and to minimize costs while also maximizing resources. Hamish now will talk a bit more about specifically the proposal of the DVS and some of the benefits and challenges that lie with going with them.
Thank you. So the DVS, they have a capacity to expand their Veterans Affairs beyond their current levels, and they have an eagerness to do so. So in looking at that, we were interested in figuring out what outreach they're currently doing. And looking at that outreach, currently it's a passive recruiting system that uses a paper-based application, as well as they don't really have a full referral process, either for their veterans or interdepartmentally. And also there's a lack of consumer awareness of the product itself. So many of the veterans don't know the potential benefits they could get under the system, so they go to Medicaid because of that. Also, there was an understanding that the VA has a great confidence in their product, and so it's not merely an issue of product, but how to get veterans from who aren't currently using the system to move over to that VA system. Looking at the cost, currently only 25% of eligible veterans are using the VA system, which means that 75% aren't. It's interesting to know why those 75% aren't. Some are in the private market, some are using Medicare, but a large portion of those people are using Medicaid. We found that about 67,200 people that could be using the VA system are using the Medicaid system instead. Looking at that, the state could save a lot of money over years by shifting people from the Medicaid system to the VA system, as the VA system is funded entirely by the federal government. So looking at that, we projected that the cost savings over a 5-year period, up to 2020, where the threshold becomes 90-10 in terms of federal to state funding, that the state could save $48.49 million. And that's actually holding healthcare costs constant, which we know is not in fact the case. Healthcare costs are much higher than inflation consistently, and that's holding the number of veterans constant, which we also know that veterans' needs are rising over time due to people coming back from wars, people being discharged, and the potential for people to move into the state or into the system.
So moving into our recommendation, we really believe that DVS needs help putting themselves out there. They need to make a name for themselves. They need to let everyone know what they can do for the veterans in regards to the veterans themselves, the public, and the other agencies. So we want them to first go digital. We want them to enter the digital space to increase access points for the veterans and their target body. We want to develop strategic partnerships so that they can be more collaborative within their efforts and maximize resources. We want to expand human capital so that we are continually arming the employees so that they can point veterans and the constituents into the right direction. So our first leg of this is going digital. Overall, it's very important that we increase the digital presence so that we have that extra touch point for veterans to go to so they can get this information. It's 2015. Most people are aware that you can go online and get lots of information, but as of right now, you can't apply online for veteran benefits, and there's little information you can get on it other than maybe contact information for the DVS. The DVS does have a website that could easily be modified, so an addendum or some type of hub that could become the central focal point for this information. It could compare the two programs, Medicaid and veteran benefits, so that you can see the broader range of benefits that's available to them. It can have frequently asked questions, so you can probably minimize some of the questions that they'd be initially coming up with, contact information, and again, this would be the focal point, so it would bring the conversation back to the DVS so that they're taking some of the responsibility off the DCH and really playing up their role. Redirecting the focal point to DVS brings us into our next leg of our strategy, which was strategic partnerships. So we really want to leverage these partnerships with nonprofits and government agencies so that we're sharing resources, we're increasing communication, and overall, we're improving agency relations. We want to have two types of partners, the first one being media partners. So we know that there's a big awareness issue. I believe the statistic was that 1 in 4 veterans are enrolled in benefits, and a lot of them had admitted that they did not know they were eligible for benefits. Through a media campaign, you could raise awareness within the public eye, and there's several partners you could go to that at a severely discounted price, and if you were going just privately or just straight up buying media. Ad Council is a nonprofit organization that specializes in public service announcements. There's several other agencies that do pro bono work, and what these agencies do is they work with you to figure out what your message is, and then they'll work with the media networks so that they can get donated media and provide you that discounted price. These partners would typically accept most of the project management role, and all the DVS would be responsible for would be for the minimal cost of production and distribution. It's a great way to tackle a large project without having the heavy burden on staff that's already and limited in capacity. Agency partners is the next asset of strategic partnerships. So we really want DVS to start working with the other government bodies. DCH, for example, where a lot of their veterans are going to get insurance to their Medicaid offices, they go there a lot of times as default. They don't know that they have this opportunity with Veteran Affairs. And we want to redirect that conversation again back to DVS. So we'd like DCH and DVS to collaborate so that maybe on the forms in the online application for Medicaid, you have a box for are you a veteran? So essentially the veterans are self-identifying themselves, and then right next to it is, if it's online, a link to redirect them to the new hub, or on the paper form, a number or the URL, so that you can bring them to the DVS website and they can get that information and go to the right people. This would relieve some of the capacity off DCH while putting the responsibility to the experts in DVS.
So this brings us to our final recommendation, and that's going to be improving the human capital. So we know that the staffers at Medicaid, at the Department of Community Health, and in the social services organizations within the community who might be pointing veterans to the VA or to Medicaid are already working very hard. So we don't expect them to be experts, but we actually want to make their job a little bit easier and make sure they're armed with that knowledge so that way when they encounter a potential beneficiary from VA benefits, that they can point them in the right direction and maybe answer a few basic questions. So what we want to propose is to have some seminars. We could do it both in person if people are able to come, and if we're able to get people out in the community, as well as online, just whatever's most convenient, to really get that basic foundational knowledge out there to help people make that connection, both when they're working with veterans who might be coming in already on Medicaid, who might benefit from a switch, as well as veterans who might be coming in due to the new requirement to have insurance, or just looking for insurance in general. So that way they know that this option exists and really tackling that opportunity in those 75% of eligible veterans who aren't on the VA benefits. So just to recap, we had 3 main pillars of our recommendation. The first being going digital, building the application into the website, redirecting traffic to make sure that people are able to see the VA in the online world. Also developing the strategic partnerships, working with the media partners, again, to make a name for the VA. So people don't think of Medicaid necessarily as the default, but veterans will start to think of the VA as the default. And again, that shared distribution. The shared distribution with the paper products and making sure that when Medicaid is getting their message out, the VA is also getting their message out, so people are aware again of those options. And then finally expanding the human capital, educating employees to make sure they can help make those connections. So just to give you an idea of the allocation with the 100K, what we're proposing, for going digital for the website restructure and building that in, we're proposing about $10,000. Again, it's not going to be, we're not building something from the ground, we're building it in. And they should already have that capacity to keep it going after it's built. The strategic partnerships is going to be the bulk of the money. So we're thinking about 85%, 70% going towards that ad campaign with Ad Council or another organization, and then 15% for paper distribution, working into the media that Medicaid already has to make sure people are aware of the options. And then the last 5% for expanding human capital. It shouldn't be too expensive of an operation. It's just going to be small seminars, but I think it will be very effective. And brought together, that's going to be the best use of these strategic partnerships. And we really want to stress, too, that this is just the initial $100,000. Speaking with the Department of Veteran Services, they did indicate that they have the capacity as they grow and take on more clients. So we believe that, if they continue to grow like that, they'll be able to explore other options, such as leveraging the Paris system to identify any veterans who are left who might not have switched from Medicaid, but who might benefit from that.
When looking at the other side of the option, there are 2 options, one of which was to work with the Veteran Services, one of which was to work with the Department of Corrections. Both were very good options, both provided substantial public good. It was a difficult decision to make, but we thought there are a few reasons that led us towards choosing the DVS over the DOC. And I'll go over that now. The objective of the DOC was to shift inmates from the DOC funding, the Department of Corrections funding for medical expenses, to Medicaid for 2 main reasons. One, there's a social good or public good that happens when an inmate can have insurance inside and outside the prison system, so that there's continuity, so they don't have to pick up and figure it out once they get out, which is oftentimes a scary and difficult time for former inmates. Also, there's a financial benefit to moving inmates to the Medicaid system, as the Medicaid would pick up the cost for any inmate who stays in the hospital for over 24 hours. Now, the reasons that we did not decide to choose this was because the DOC has a legal opportunity already and the ability to process, albeit slowly, the inmates to move over to Medicaid. So we feel like they have natural incentive to do so anyway, to alleviate some of their budgetary pressures. So over time, those can be processed. While the DHC is somewhat stressed, we understand that over time, they will be able to process that. Additionally, it affects a small percentage of the population. Currently, there are about 50,000 inmates in the system, of which we estimate about 3.5% are staying in the hospital for over 24 hours, which is a fairly limited amount. So the cost savings would only impact 3.5% of the inmates. Now, understandably, 50,000 people would be shifted over to Medicaid, which would also be a fairly good public interest. It'd be a public interest, but that is compared to the 67,200 veterans that could be aided as well. Also looking at the cost savings decrease over time as the state picks up more of the Medicaid funding, because it goes from the state paying 0% in 2015 to paying 10% in 2020. So as you shift people to the Medicaid system, you're actually getting less cost saving over time. You are saving costs, but you're getting less cost saving over time. And if you're including the inflation of Medicaid costs or health costs in general, that's going to be an issue. Also, it creates more work for the DCH without having the real ability to provide long-term funding or long-term resources for them to restructure. $100,000 can only do so much, And we figured that in this situation, to maximize the resources, it would actually be beneficial to use it on the veteran services to create the groundwork for them to get up and running, while the DOC can do that largely within their own interest.
And just to conclude, we also believe that while choosing the Department of Veteran Services is going to make the best use of this $100,000, part of the reason we believe that is because as time goes by, we think the Department of Corrections will actually benefit as well. As more veterans are signing up for the VA benefits rather than Medicaid, that's going to free up a little bit of resources within the Department of Community Health to take on more from the DOC as they do make that switch. As Hamish said, it's a natural incentive for them because they'll have a lot of cost saving. And then also just kind of thinking long term, that might open up the possibility then with those extra resources to have somebody do a small amount of outreach within the prison community to make sure there are less people leaving prison without insurance. Again, adding to that public good. This concludes our presentation, our recommendations for how to we think you guys can best use the $100,000 grant, and we welcome your questions.
Yeah, so sorry. So let's talk about this system a little bit more, right? Let's talk about the Department of Veterans Affairs systems. You guys mentioned a couple of different options. Did you look through what that would actually entail, on the ground? You said $10,000 and allocated some funds to that. Can you give me a little bit more specifics as to the steps that we need to take, or maybe what you see would be the best way to enroll veterans through the system?
Speak a little bit about the website and get to human services.
I think the first initial point would be to developing a focal hub for veterans to go initially. Yes, they can go to the DVS website or their local VA office, but for ease of themselves and to increase accessibility, I think the first step would be to build an online addendum to the website, so it's specifically dedicated to veteran benefits. It's easy for them to digest and hits home why veteran affairs benefits would be more beneficial to them. The next step, I think, would be then to expanding the human capital so that on the grassroots for those individuals going into the individual agencies or a Medicaid office, those employees would be able to direct them online or to the correct office so that they're getting the proper service. And then in conjunction with that, once the website's up and running, the essential marketing effort would help to raise awareness for not only people who may not have insurance and are looking at that point in time, but the message could be structured so that it sends almost a trigger to people and veterans who have insurance, whether it be private or Medicaid, to indicate, hey, I could actually be going to Veterans Affairs and be getting a better program in comparison to the coverage they already have.
About your projections around cost savings. What assumptions did you guys make regarding how many veterans you'd be diverting out of Medicaid into Veteran Affairs in those cost calculations?
So from the information that was provided for us, we knew that there are 2.4 million people in the Medicaid system in the state, of which 7% are veterans. It doesn't say eligible or ineligible veterans, so we can assume we assume that 7% of that 2.4 million were veterans, as explained. So we took that portion and figured that 40% nationwide were eligible veterans. So we assumed that our state was on par with the national average. So about 40% of that 7%, which ended up being about 67,200 people, veterans, who would benefit from moving, or who are on Medicaid but who were eligible to be on the VA system.
Sorry, go ahead, Betty.
So are you assuming you would be able to get all of them to shift the first year, or?
So this is a maximum projection. So this is
Potential.
This is a maximum potential. So while while we recognize over the course of a year, it may be very difficult, both capacity-wise and for people to know and to get 100% of everyone on. These are the maximum projections. Likewise, we did maximum projections for the prison population, and we determined that using maximum projections for both, this would provide an increasing cost saving over time, while the other one would actually be providing a cost savings, but it would kind of flatline over time, or it would decrease.
Any other questions?
I have a question. So with regard to, sort of the digital campaign, I'm only a little concerned that $10,000 is a really low estimate for how much it would actually cost for us to make modifications to the website. I agree with you. There's obviously already an infrastructure in place, but for example, did you take into account any potential, if the objective is to increase the amount of traffic on that website, did your estimate take into account any potential investments we would need to make in expanded server capacity or other hardware? Because right now a lot of our costs are actually driven by that type of infrastructure as opposed to just the man hours it would take to build a new website. Even if we were talking about man hours to modify a website, I still think 10,000 might be a little low. But that aside, there are obviously other considerations. So what went into that assessment?
So our 10% allocation of 100K was more focused on the actual engineering to the site that would need to be done. Since it's already a government website, it's already going to be well protected and probably have under our assumptions the correct firewall and server capacity to handle attention from a national audience. Modifying the site, I have a little bit of HTML and website background. In general, to add an addendum or essentially almost like an extra drop-down tab or section to a website isn't too much re-engineering in itself, because it essentially be duplicating another section of the site and changing the content of it in its own. In terms of labor costs, because we don't know the internal wages of the people within the government, or if they're going to contract out the service, we wouldn't be able to ballpark that cost without a little bit more information. But I would say a $10,000 estimate is pretty safe estimate for the actual re-engineering itself.
And I would add too, I know your concern was downstream, we're going to get more people. When we did speak with the Department of Veteran Services, they indicated that they felt very confident in being able to handle that capacity, at least in terms of applications, and we think that would be able to transfer online as well.
Okay, so to be clear, your assumption is that the current servers and infrastructure of the agency can handle potentially 67,000 more visitors. Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's just the potential. We're not saying they're going to have that much, but they could.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys.